Three, two, one. Welcome to Sounding Point Podcast. My name is Joseph Christensen, and with me today is Charith Premawardhana. He is a string player of all sorts, and he is a Bay Area icon, the founder of Classical Revolution, an organization that presents classical music performances in non-traditional locations all over the city and now all over the world. Featured by the New York Times, The Economist, and SF Chronicle, Strings Magazine, and many other publications, Classical Revolution has spread to chapters across the United States and overseas. At the beginning of this pandemic, Charith put on a gargantuan live stream project through Classical Revolution, which was actually one of the first things I ever did with this podcast. So thank you for bringing my fledgling podcast on to your live stream. I interviewed Monica Gruber on her performance and promptly lost my internet connection in the middle of the interview. Just that perfect live stream experience. So that was really nice. But man, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Joe. I've been following a couple of your previous podcast guests. Looks like you have some pretty luminary guests on there. Evan Kahn, it's nice to hear his interview. Mm-hmm. You were in a string quartet with Evan, is that right?
That's right. So we played in a string quartet for a few years when we were in school together and a little bit after. So
that was with Justine Preston?
That's right. Yep.
And
Claire Armanon.
Claire. I played with Claire last week.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna play with her at a wedding, and Evan actually. We're gonna do a wedding, all socially distanced in Pleasanton next week. So things are starting to happen again. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of duo performances, like on the street. So the thing I did with Claire was at Ghirardelli Square. They have a weekly series there, and they have different kinds of bands, like rock bands and jazz bands. And somebody recommended that they call me, because I've been doing a bunch of duo performances here in the Mission District. And I have one main guy I've been playing with who's, I don't know if you know him, he's kind of new in town. This guy's Scott Moore. So he and I have been playing a lot, He's a pretty versatile violin player, And like me, he's a switch hitter, so he plays violin and viola. But he also switch hits in the fact that he does classical straight ahead playing as well as more improvisatory jazz playing, as I know you're in the same boat, and many of our friends are not just doing classical music anymore on their violins, which is cool and fun. It's nice to be versatile and be able to do different things. Anyway, Scott and I have been playing together a lot, and I've kind of just been developing my comping, where I can just, like, as a viola, I can serve as the bass and the percussion and just like be the rhythm guy, and then I let the other guy just like play the melodies. But then we could always like switch, so we do some trading as well. So Scott and I have been playing together a lot. He has a day job, so the performance last week was Friday at like 3:00, so he wasn't able to do it. So Claire was able to fill in, and it was pretty last minute. So, and she could definitely like do some shredding as well as like really good classical reading, So it's cool to have her.
She's super versatile. Shout out to Claire. She's an awesome improviser.
Yo, Claire.
She can play jazz. She can play bluegrass. She can.
I heard bluegrass stuff. That's awesome. Yeah.
Amazing. So it's.
Doorbell. Go ahead.
Oh yeah.
It's gonna turn for a second. Okay.
It's interesting how I feel like this city. I think this city is probably a microcosm of every major city, every cultural center in the United States. In that you have kind of this interesting crossover element. I mean, I like to think San Francisco is especially rich when it comes to crossover and just kind of creative musical styles popping. I mean, I play in Quartet San Francisco, very crossover, very different. You have done, I know last year you did your Abbey Road arrangement, and you've done so much this crossover. How did you get into this? I suppose, did you always listen to other styles of music? How did you get into applying different stuff?
Yeah, well, I grew up listening to rock and roll, you know, and I guess my parents were into the. I mean, we didn't have any Beatles records at home, but we had some Simon and Garfunkel. So, and then I was listening to rock and roll radio when I was growing up, and then I started getting into classic rock, and I was like, wow, this old rock and roll music is so cool, you know. And I think I'm a little bit older than you, so like when I was growing up, it was, you know, when I was starting high school, it was around the time of grunge music, so like everybody was getting into Nirvana and Pearl Jam and all that stuff. And so I kind of just like grew up with that stuff, and then but like I never like I started playing guitar when I was in high school, just like learning chords, you know, just learning songs. And, you know, like my first song was like Free Falling. So it was just kind of the easiest song to play on guitar ever. And my second song I learned how to play was Blister in the Sun, which is probably the second easiest song to learn how to play on guitar.
Good progression.
Yeah. But then, you know, I never really started listening to jazz until I went to college. And I had a friend who was really into jazz, you know, and I started college at Oberlin, and then I transferred over to Ohio State in Columbus because I knew the teacher there really well. But then he used to take me out to jazz clubs in Columbus. And this was actually when Christian Howes was still living in Columbus, when he was starting his jazz career. So we used to go listen to Christian Howes play, you know. And before he went to New York, before he made it huge, you know, and he was just like gigging in Columbus, Ohio at local jazz clubs. But there is like a really good local jazz scene there in Columbus, and so there's like 2 or 3 clubs we used to go to. So that's when I started broadening into jazz, you know, which was like a revelation for me. But still, you know, like my roots, my like growing up, you know, was in rock and roll as well as classical music.
And did you start improvising and actually like diving into the jazz repertoire at that point?
Not so much until I moved to San Francisco in 2004 to do chamber music at the conservatory, and graduated in 2006. While I was at conservatory, I was looking for ways to like branch out and do different stuff and interesting stuff, you know. And I was very new to San Francisco, so I didn't know the depth and range of what was happening here, you know.
Yeah.
But slowly I found out, you know, I remember one of the first things I did is I went and recorded viola on a hip hop record. And I remember driving out to like East Oakland, and I wasn't sure like what I was getting into. It was pretty weird. Like, I was living in the Sunset, you know. Yeah. So I guess I was pretty open to doing different stuff when I moved to San Francisco. But then I auditioned for and joined the punk rock orchestra because a friend of mine, Ian Dickinson, shout out Ian Dickinson, he's a bassist and a composer. And like also while I was like at the conservatory, I was playing a lot of music written by student composers. And we had some really great composers while I was a student there. It was a really nice time to be at the conservatory. It was like the guys who did the Switchboard Music Festival, if you know about that. We were students together. And I was there, you know, I was playing a lot with Hannah Adario Berry, shout out Hannah. And she does a lot of cool stuff these days. But the composers who were there, you know, Juwon Kim was a classmate. Nice. I was playing a lot of his music. Cool. Shout out Mick Nawuj Ensemble. I was there for the early stages of Mick Nawuj Ensemble. And before it was the Mick Nawuj Ensemble. Yeah. But Ian Dickinson was he was a jazz bassist. So he got involved with the punk rock orchestra. So he got several conservatory people. You probably never heard of the punk rock orchestra.
No, I'm not familiar.
the punk rock. Well, it was around since like the '90s or so, the late '90s, and then like it kind of died away, and they're trying to bring it back. But basically, it would be like 50-piece symphony orchestra backing up a punk band. And we did shows. We did a few shows at like Slim's and at the Swedish American Hall. So that was kind of my first taste into doing something that was non-classical. So I was like, but then since then, I've been doing so much, and so when I graduated, I moved to the Mission District. I was living in the Sunset. Well, the conservatory was on 19th Avenue, the Sunset. Then I moved to the Mission, and there was so much happening in the Mission. It was unbelievable.
Yeah,
well, it's like this is before our modern tech boom, where the Mission was like still pretty grungy. It was grungy for a while, but it was still pretty grungy. And there was a lot of artists and musicians living there because it was cheap. Yeah. The first place they rented in the Mission was $250 a month.
Wow. God.
This was in 2006. My buddy had a storefront, and he was just he built it out. We had a small kitchen and a working bathroom. It was pretty like rudimentary. But
how much would that room go for today?
Well, I don't think it's a room anymore. It was like I think it used to be a barber shop, and then my friend's cousin was using it to store his ceramic supplies. But yeah, I don't know that location is probably it's probably 10 times that or something.
I was curious because you're in the Mission right now. I escaped the city. I mean, I miss it a lot actually, but I'm out in Livermore. There's not as much going on out here, but it's kind of nice. I mean,
well, there's not as much going on in general.
Yeah,
with our current state of pandemic society. But going back to crossover stuff, and it's like, so when I was living there, when I first moved to the Mission, there was so much happening. There was like a lot of there's so many venues, so many musicians living there, and like everybody was playing in the neighborhood. And Revolution Cafe was kind of the headquarters because like there was live music every night. That was the place where all the musicians and everybody was hanging out there. Marcus Shelby was playing there a lot. If you shout out Marcus, one of their preeminent jazz bassists and composers in the city, and he still lives like a few blocks from me,
nice.
In the Mission District. But he was playing all the time. And the guy who was booking music was Joe Lewis. And I don't know if, shout out Joe Lewis. He still lives like 2 blocks from me, so I see him around.
That's awesome.
But he was, he really wanted to get like a nice cross section of music happening at Revolution Cafe. So, there was like a folk music, like get together every Saturday, and then there was jazz every Tuesday, and there's a lot of jazz, but everything from Balkan music, and there's still a lot of Balkan music happening there. Well, not right now, but so he kind of started Revolution Cafe on that trajectory of being open to many styles of music. So when I moved there, we were hanging out there a lot, and it was like one of the few places where you can like sit and have a drink and watch a band and have a conversation, and it was always free, and like everybody was always very generous. And the reason Joe like ended up leaving Revolution Cafe because he was always having fights with the owners, specifically about paying the musicians. That's kind of like an ongoing thread, through all of this was like treating like the venues. That relationship is always tricky and difficult between venues and musicians and audiences, and how to balance that and make it work. But like living there, being at Revolution Cafe, then I started playing with Jazz Mafia, and they were playing every Tuesday at Bruno's. So that was like my Tuesday hang, was going to Bruno's every week, and those guys are so cool, and they were doing so much innovative and like diverse stuff, so yeah, just like going from there. And then I was playing a lot with Eric Jacobson, and he was doing some small group stuff, so
cool.
So yeah, it was, and then I started playing with the indie rock band, and then we did a tour, and then started playing with Rupa, and I played with McLeod and did some touring with Rupa. and the April Fishes. A lot of shout outs here. So
yeah, I know.
a lot of shout outs.
I've been bad. I haven't I haven't put like the shout outs in the description or anything, but I'm going to. I think it'd be cool for people to know they're being shouted out. And, you know, eventually this podcast should have more than 4 listeners. So
It'll make it go viral.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm going to do that. And it's freaking awesome. Yeah. So yeah, it's like a very fertile ground for crossover.
It was happening, you know. It became so cool that everybody wants to live here, and now it's not affordable anymore.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
I don't know if it's all our fault. We might be partly responsible. Mostly, I think it became easy and nice for companies to move to San Francisco. I think there were some tax situations, you know. I don't know all the details. I dabble in politics, but I'm mostly what do you call it when you don't really know about anything but you think you do?
I was
idiot. No, there's a word for that.
I was thinking too hard. I was gonna say apolitical, but I think you're looking for something else.
Apolitical, yeah. So it's been fun watching the debates and everything. You know, this has been fun. Let's just use the word fun. It's been fun.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So, but I do have to give one more shout out, which was 10 years ago, which would be 2010. There's a lot that happened. We've been having a few 10-year anniversaries. Like last year was going back to Jazz Mafia. Last year was a 10-year anniversary of Adam Thies wrote this 60-minute jazz hip hop. It's like jazz and it's hip hop and it's also Latin jazz, and it's like so much stuff went into this composition. It's like one of the coolest pieces of music I've still ever listened to. And he called it Brass Bows and Beats. We did it. We premiered it 10 years ago, I believe, 11 years ago, and then we toured it 10 years ago. So like the first show was a 60-piece orchestra, jazz hip hop orchestra, with like a row of saxophones, a row of trumpets, a row of trombones, 2 flutes, 2 French horns, 2 basses, 2 keyboards, 2 drummers. The most we had was like 12 strings or maybe 16 strings. 4 singers, 3 rappers, and a DJ.
Oh my god!
Yeah, so much fun though.
You say you toured that?
Somehow, like he got a nice grant for the composition from Bueller Carbode, so he was able to like put it together, and everybody got paid for rehearsals. That was the coolest thing about that whole thing is like everyone still got paid decently, even though there's so many people. But he had a good support. I think he had a producer or something who was backing the tour. But we were doing we did like pretty established jazz festivals. We played at the Hollywood Bowl, the Playboy Jazz Festival. Before that, we did Harmony Festival, which was up in Santa Rosa, which is kind of like a smaller festival, but you know, it had like a pretty big acts on it. Like,
did you guys play at the San Jose Jazz Festival?
We did San Jose. We did Monterey.
I think this is a crazy thing. I think I saw. I know I saw you there. Yeah. That before I went to the
indoor show, it was like at a theater or something, an indoor show.
Yep. I saw that. It was before I went to the conservatory.
There are some great crossover string players on that, including Mad Stoling and Anthony Blea. Shout out. But then we took it to the East Coast. We played Montreal Jazz Festival. We played at the Poisson Rouge in New York.
Wow.
And we played at Newport Jazz Festival. And we had Curtis Stewart, shout out, on that show. I think he was on the Newport show. Who he's a great jazz violin player in New York, kind of up and coming. He's in a string quartet called the Public Quartet, and they're getting a lot of good press and recognition. Yeah, he put out a couple of really cool like videos recently, so it's been really fun seeing what everybody's doing, you know, with their creative ways of making music in pandemic times.
Yeah, it's been it's like a golden age of content. It's like whatever the opposite of a golden age is in like real life. But like for content and musicians producing things online, it's been a golden age.
Yeah. So what have you been doing? You've been making some videos with QSF and other people and stuff.
Yeah, we're making some more videos, and that's been fun. I'm kind of I'm trying to figure out the right way to say it. I feel like for the podcast, there's like a honeymoon phase, and I'm interested to see what you think about this as a starter of things. But there's like a honeymoon phase where you start something and you're like, this is the best, I'm going to grow. This is going to be the biggest thing ever. And then, it goes on for a month, 2 months, 3 months. And you're like, okay, am I committed to this? Is this project going to stay, And I'm reaching that with this podcast of figuring out, okay, what's the work-life balance? How many of these am I going to do a week? What am I going to do to make the content the best I can? How much time am I going to spend on the podcast? So anyway, this has been my main extra thing during the quarantine.
Yeah. So besides that, you still have a teaching studio?
Yeah. So I've been teaching a lot. Thank God for online lessons. That saved my butt. And so far it's been stable. Like so far, people have still wanted their kids to have their extracurriculars. So that's been a huge thing for me. How about you?
Yeah.
So you're doing the sidewalk concerts?
Sidewalk concerts, I was pretty bummed out, during the fires and smoke where couldn't even do our sidewalk concerts.
Man.
So I was getting ready to get out of here.
I saw that status. Where were you thinking about?
I was just thinking about doing a road trip, seeing the country. Yeah. A couple of my friends have been doing that,
It's a good idea.
Yeah, I have some friends who are in a Beatles tribute band, like a really serious, like really good Beatles tribute band, based in Cincinnati area. But they did a huge road trip, but like with really nice video equipment, and they got amazing shots like all over the U.S. Like drone cameras, So there's a lot of people are doing seeing the country kind of things.
Yeah,
a lot of people are doing video content.
Yep.
And a few people are doing podcasts. Have you checked out? Have you checked out Louis Passner's podcast?
Yes, yeah, he was one of my inspirations for.
Yeah.
I think he was. It's like it's funny. I probably only met him like once or twice. We're not close at all, but I was aware of his podcast for a long time. He was the original Bay Area musician podcast.
He's the godfather of Bay Area classical music.
He was the Bay Area podfather. Shout out to Louis. So no, that was really one of the inspirations. I think in some ways what you were doing with the live stream, also just seeing you were putting something out every single weekend, I was like, man, I don't have any excuses.
I got a little burnt out on that, I have to say. On Human Phase.
You did. Let's go into that, because you did like some 24-hour like insane live streams. How did it start, and then what was like the peak insanity?
How it started was, when the pandemic hit, I was wondering what to do with myself. I've been doing a live show at Revolution Cafe or a different venue every week for the past 14 years. So it's just kind of in that routine of doing at least one show, usually multiple shows, So I just kind of wanted to keep that going, just because I'm used to having that schedule. And I came up with two ideas, which was doing a live stream show. And I don't know why or how I thought that would work, I felt like it didn't need to be perfect, and everyone's using like their cell phones, and sometimes it cuts out, and sometimes like the internet's not great, and it was definitely not perfect a lot, but going back to no, a lot of it was really great. There's some really amazing content that came out of those. You kind of have to dig through it a little bit if you don't know where it is, because each show was 8 hours long. With it started out with it was on Saturdays. It started out with 15 sets
Wow.
meaning each set was half an hour and the final set was an hour, basically. But it was a way for me to kind of reach out to people I haven't seen or talked to in a while. And we had people like each week there was somebody who was out of the country, usually in Europe.
Yep.
We had a really great violin player who streamed in from Brazil. So it was like people from all over the place, you know. So that was like a really cool aspect about it. So yeah, I was thinking I wanted to do something like that, and then I had the idea of doing a live stream, not a live stream, but a virtual orchestra, kind of like a Eric Whittaker kind of thing, where everybody sends in their videos, you know. And I underestimated the length of time and work it would take to put that together. Yeah, because that was in March, and I'm still working on it. It's getting close. People are really good at submitting their videos in time, and I have 64 submissions. So I have a 64-piece orchestra I'm putting together of Beethoven's Coriolan Overture. So I'm trying to at least get it done before Beethoven's 250th birthday, hopefully sooner. But it's getting close, you know.
Did you do
those were the two ideas I wanted to do: was the orchestra and the live stream show. Did
you do it to click track? How did you get people to play together?
Yeah, everything. It's on a steady click track, so there's no retardandos or ritenutos or rubatos written in the score. So I was like, let's just like play the score and play it like at tempo. And that's kind of like one of my biggest things, and a lot of people don't like that about playing with me, is like I don't really like slowing down when it's not written, you know?
Yeah.
Like, or even in general, like, and that maybe that's part of my rock and roll mentality is that I like it to just groove, you know?
Yeah.
And to just like keep going, especially if it's not written in the score, you know? And sometimes I even like pushing the tempo.
Right.
I'm like, as a viola player, like I have that luxury because I'm like playing a lot of motor rhythms and stuff. But then like violin players are like, well, you know, yeah. I mean, I was almost gonna. I don't know if we want to swear on this, but they would use some kind of expletive to say like, you know, what are you doing? You know, there are a couple memorable times where you know, pretty decent violin players were like, I can't play that fast. You gotta ease off the pedal there, man. But you know, it was like Revolution Cafe and playing there. It was always so much fun because we could be spontaneous because I mean we were playing. It's like, you know, like our reading sessions there. I forget how many times you played there, Joe, at Revolution.
A few, yeah. I've probably played there 4 times.
You played with your quartet, or you came for some reading sessions?
I've come with a group. Shout out to Jasmine Nagano. I played Brahms horn trio. I think that was the first time I played at Classical Rev, actually. And then ever since then, I've probably been to 3 or 4 reading sessions.
So, I mean, for the reading sessions, we do stuff that we know, but it's unrehearsed, so we can't. I encourage like taking risks and doing stuff that like you would not do if your coach was there, you know, at the conservatory. So I mean, it's like that would happen sometimes where I was. Because, like, you know, we're playing for kind of a rock and roll audience over there. It's not your typical classical audience. They don't understand that, like, oh, like, this rubato, that's how they do it on every recording, you know? They don't care about that. They know what they listen to. They know, like, what they groove to. And if it's grooving, then it's cool, you know? So I always like that attitude, you know, in general with music. I forgot where we started on this stuff.
No, that's a great point. I thought I was teaching an adult student yesterday who is more of that kind of rock background, at least what he listens to and everything. And he was trying to get me to explain, so why are you slowing down there? Like, why do you play longer at that note? And I'm like explaining rubato to him. And he's like, but is it mathematically going to add up? Like rubato, you're supposed to take away here and add somewhere, but it's not going to add up, right? And I'm like, you know what? It's not. It's just that it's very subjective, you know. So it's kind of interesting that difference in attitudes.
The way I feel about it, I feel like music is is an art form, the canvas of which is time. And so when we alter or manipulate the time, it should be for a very specific reason. And I feel like a lot of the time, the reason is technical deficiency. Either that, or the reason is that's the way it's always done, which I don't think that's a great reason. But
dang. Called out the classical music industry, right?
Yeah. No, not to say that. I mean, yeah. I mean, just like, I guess that's my personal experience, Not to I'm not going to shout out anybody for technical deficiency right now.
Let's see.
But, I mean, there's so many great musicians that I like to push the issue, and we have the freedom there at Revolution Cafe to do that, because it's like it's kind of low pressure, it's low stakes, low pressure.
It's super fun. It's super fun.
Are we getting close to time here?
Oh, let's see. Yeah, before we go, I think we have 10 more minutes or so. I wanted to just run through classical revolution with you, just because I think it's fascinating. As you were saying, right? So you were out of school in 2006, right? So this is before the tech boom as it currently has manifested.
It was around that time because YouTube started in 2006. I remember YouTube was coming to Revolution Cafe to try to get us to post content.
Nice.
That's one of those things about documenting and everything. I just never got around to doing that.
Yeah, that's cool. That's interesting.
But yeah, that was around the same time that this .com was starting. Was
right. So because last podcast I did, it's becoming a theme of the show, which is how classical musicians are staying or becoming relevant or interacting in our modern world in such a way that we are adding to the cultural richness of our world rather than isolating ourselves off in an ivory tower. And it's just fascinating to me that, to paint the picture. So you had this incredibly diverse and incredibly rich sort of set of jazz and punk and Balkan music and all these different styles of music. But in a way, it was very stratified because you didn't have classical revolution, right? So I think it'd be interesting to compare the classical music scene back then with what it is now, and then maybe see what it could be. But correct me if I'm wrong, there was, besides the opera, besides symphony, besides the ballet, besides a few chamber music venues, was there really a place to play in the city that people knew about?
You mean as a freelancer?
As a classical musician.
I was playing a lot. I was doing a lot of symphony jobs back then, but a freelance philharmonic kind of thing. So
right. So there's the regional orchestras around the area, right?
But besides that, what was going on? Well, I don't know. I think there's as you said, there's been a handful of things. I talked to shout out Sam Bass. You guys know Sam Bass at all?
No.
Sam Bass was he was kind of one of the first guys who was doing cello, but doing rock and roll and doing it really well.
Yeah.
It's in the mid '90s. But he had a quartet with Anthony Blea and with Graham Jennings, who went on to play in the Arditi Quartet. Nice. They were playing at Café du Nord once a week in the mid '90s. So those guys are kind of our regional forefathers, And I think back to Bad Heimovitz, who was doing a lot of stuff, clubs and stuff like that, So he was kind of an originator. And for myself, I experienced classical music at a bar when I was living in Houston. I did grad school at Rice, and there was a series put on by Houston Symphony musicians called Bar Music, BAR Music, which was it was all contemporary music taking place in a bar in Houston, and I thought that was really cool. Then when I was a student at conservatory, I was my teacher Jody Levitz, shout out Jody. She I was trying to find a venue for my recital because I was late in booking the hall, as many students are, because there's only limited spots, especially at the end of the year. There's only so many slots available, so a lot of students will go off campus and do their recital at a church or something like that. I chose to do mine at the bar down the street, and Jody thought it was so cool because she was able to have a glass of wine at her student recital.
Revolutionary in that regard, yes.
Yeah, and that was a fun recital. I played all music written after 1995. The earliest piece was Georgi Ligeti Solo Viola Sonata, and everything else was written by people I personally knew. Either were students at conservatory or other composers who were living in the area. So that was like that. That's kind of how my experience or my knowledge of like playing in alternative spaces before we started, and then like Poisson and Rouge started at the same time, and they were kind of trying to do a similar kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, there was I was playing a lot to the BART station when I was like conservatory. Like that's kind of like a tradition for conservatory students. Yeah. So we were doing a lot of that. I was playing in this quartet with Sam Van Loon and with Joyce Lee and with this girl Megan, who doesn't live here anymore. But we were playing a lot together, and I was thinking about Mark Sokol. You ever work with Mark Sokol?
R.I.P. The greatest. Yeah.
I was thinking about the name of your podcast, and that was his big thing, was Sounding Point.
That's cool. That's true. I hadn't thought of that in particular, but I mean, I honestly am thinking of getting some of his students on, like Joseph Maley and some other people who worked with him a lot, because I only had 1 year with him, but it was life-changing. So yeah, he was great.
Yeah.
R.I.P.
No, yeah, he used to talk about, that's all he talked about was where is your bow? What kind of sound are you making?
True.
And I listened a little bit to your interview with Evan, and you were talking about how Evan kind of influenced the way you think about string quartet and about your focus on sound. I think that was also his big thing, and so it was really great working with all those guys, with Ian Swenson and Jody, and Axel Strauss was on faculty.
Yeah, he was my teacher for the first 3 years. So
and I think Axel taught Monica Gruber, right? Or she worked. Were you able to follow up with Monica?
No, haven't done it yet, but I'd love to have her back on.
You should bring. Yeah, she's she would be able to talk about all those people, Axel, and it was really great also as a chamber music major to be able to play with all those guys. So I played a quartet concert with Axel and Jean-Michel, and I played with Bettina and Jody. And one of the coolest things I did was play with Ian's brother, Joey Swenson. We played a string quartet. We played a Mozart G major string quartet, but I cannot play that G major string quartet again because, like the way that we played it with him, it was just like so unique and cool. Like I played it so many times since then, but
I had one lesson with him. He was really cool, really incredible musician, interesting person.
Yeah. So I guess conservatory. This is like tangent pod right now.
It's all good, man.
I guess conservatory is starting up now with. Are they having in-person classes?
Yeah, I think from what I hear, they're coming back to in person with the Bose Center. It's crazy.
Right, they built that huge thing.
The brand new campus. Yeah, the conservatory has changed so much.
So the Bose Center is residence, and it's also practice spaces and performance space.
Yeah, it's got everything. And it's funny. I think you and I, even though you went when it was on. Was it Noriega?
No, I closed out Ortega Street. Yeah,
Ortega. Yeah. And I went, to a few years later, but we had pretty much the same faculty, so we worked with the same people more or less. And now it's so different. It's just been like 5 years, but everything's changed. A few of
there. Ian is still there, and Paul is still there.
Mm-hmm. And I think Jean-Michel is still there.
Jean-Michel is still
there. That's about it for the old faculty. But crazy times.
You know what was crazy is that a lot of people like don't know this, but Ian, Jean-Michel, and Jody are the same age.
Really? That's so cool.
Yeah, I don't know. Don't quote me on that. I think there was some relationship like that. But.
That's cool. That's awesome.
But anyway, Joey is. I think we need to wrap up.
Let's see.
I was going to say like some nice parting words here.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, I'm glad I finally got you on the podcast. Thank you for working out the schedule with me. I'll have to have you back on sometime and talk more about the old days, talk more about the new days.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
Talk about what's coming up in the future. But yeah, thanks for hopping on with me, man.
Things are happening. We have our next month is our 14th anniversary of Classical Revolution, and I'm starting to think about like I want to do a couple things. We have a couple things planned. So we're planning a concert in Half Moon Bay at a friend's house outdoors, and another concert in Cupertino at a friend's place outdoors. And we have something in the Mission planned outdoors on 16th Street for a friend series that she's putting on. So we'll have a few things happening around that time. Probably just like a small group of musicians. Mm-hmm. I don't even know if we'll have a string quartet. Do you mind? Mm-hmm. Just trying to see like what we can do that's responsible, and like there's a balance between being safe and still doing something that is fun and impactful, and so there's a balance there that I think everybody's trying to think about and work out.
There's got to be a hunger for live performance now.
Yeah, I think so, but I think people are still cautious, especially here in San Francisco and California. Yeah. Other places, I think people are like, all they want to do is go out and do stuff.
Yeah.
We had a COVID scare. One of our musicians tested positive after we had a rehearsal, so we all hibernated for quarantine for a couple of weeks, and everyone tested positive. So that was
whoa.
I think that was lucky. Yeah.
Oh, so you did?
No, none of us tested positive.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah, but like he had a slight fever and he got better, so it affects different people differently. But I think everyone's trying to just be safe, But it's such a lifestyle change for all of us, So I don't hate it, I have to say. I kind of like not hustling around all the time.
Yeah. No, I definitely don't miss the commute, to be honest.
Yeah, and I'm also very thankful for the federal economic stimulus. I mean, like the $1,200 was nothing, but the unemployment stimulus was significant.
Sure. Yeah.
I've been living off that and like doing my little shows. Unfortunately, I feel so fortunate that I've been able to work a lot the past few years.
Yeah.
Have a decent amount of savings at this time. I know there's so many people that don't have that and are struggling. Yeah. So many people in our music community as well, so it's hard to know what to do and how to support. There's so many people having a hard time, so I don't know. Let's try to find some solutions. Let's try to, I just want to like keep doing good work, and I feel inspired, seeing what everybody's doing to like keep doing what I'm doing to just live and give some inspiration, pass it around.
Yeah. I had before we sign off, I had a quick question for you. I think is just relevant for everyone. I mean, I'd love to talk to you at a later time, just about like the industry and distribution and all the big questions that are facing us right now. But just on a micro level, I'm starting this podcast. I feel like so many musicians they have to adapt to this time, right? We don't have a choice. A lot of people are starting things right now. And as you, the OG starter of things in San Francisco, do you have any advice for or just thoughts on seeing starting a project and having it 14 years later be what it is? Like, do you have any advice for people starting something?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ideas. You know, I think some ideas are better than other ideas. And in terms of like your podcast, I've seen like so many cool guests you've been having, present company included.
Oh yeah.
uh, but Joe Lewis, who I shout out. I shouted
Yeah,
him out.
shout out. Good. Put his name twice in the description.
Yeah. He with the timestamp.
Yeah.
But he gave like the advice he gave me when we first started doing Classical Revolution at Revolution Cafe was to just like keep doing it, even if it's like not always great. Just like keep working at it. I don't know, because like he believed in what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he saw that like there was nobody else who was really doing that on the level. Not, I mean like at the not to say like I mean just like regularly. You know, there weren't as many people doing it weekly, like putting on a live music chamber music performance in an alternative space. So like he suggested that we just keep doing it. If it's not always that great, it'll keep building. And he was right. You know, like we started getting like so many great musicians. We had great musicians from the beginning, but then we started getting like so many great musicians coming into play, and then it became like a huge thing. So I mean, like if you have something that you believe in, then just like keep working at it. But like if you lose interest, that happened. It happened to me with the live stream thing. You know, it was 8 hours every Saturday, and it was a lot of prep work.
Yeah.
And I had really good help from my buddy David Skeeter, who was like doing a lot of tech stuff. But it was like the last one we did was 36 hours, which is when you were 36 hours. Yeah,
I didn't know how I felt like I was imagining you just staying awake for 3 days on end. Is nuts.
That was the original plan, was to stay awake, but it turned out like I had some people in Europe and Asia lined up to do the live stream, but like a couple of them bailed, so I ended up just like putting on a video playlist for the nice 5 hours.
Good
and then I slept for a little bit. But yeah, even with that, like I intended to take a couple of weeks off after that. Come back, but I stopped doing it. That was around the same time we started doing our sidewalk shows also.
Right. So in a way, it's like
kind of replaced the weekly fix for me.
So for you, it almost, obviously there's two sides of it. There's the side of you have to be consistent. You have to just keep going, even if you don't get insane reward, like right off the beginning. You have to have persistence, but also you have to be flexible to know it's the most valuable. So like if what's the most important to you is actually having some live shows and putting out content, even if it's not your gigantic 8-hour thing, then you're flexible to change to that if it's not sustainable.
Yeah. I think when you're starting out, you can't really just like hold on to one way of doing it. So like I was thinking about a podcast, and my idea was to have like 3 people on the same time, like kind of like a round table Bill Maher kind of thing,
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I still might try to do that. Maybe
Hey, man.
If you want to
that'd be awesome. That'd be great. I thought of the panel form too. I mean, a lot of the podcasts I like, they have multiple people, and the chemistry between the regulars is part of what's cool about a podcast in the first place. So, yeah.
But I watched Joe Rogan's podcast. So
yeah.
People say different things about him, but I really enjoyed like the way he's able to get people to be comfortable and to be like to be able to, and like the questions he asks, and then it's all like nothing is planned. It's like the idea of like doing a 3-hour show where you just talk for a while. That's kind of interesting. But I would say, just keep doing it, but also be flexible, as you said, and listen to your audience. And like, if you need to adapt and try something different, then do it, or do something else. It just depends. Like, listen to yourself also.
Yeah. For sure.
How much do you want to keep doing this? Like, but I encourage you to get to definitely like. I love what you're doing, Joe.
Thank you, man.
And like there's so many cool guests out there that you can bring on here. So I think you you have a rich supply of content. That they can produce from all our friends.
Yeah, it's
cool
true.
Music.
That's I mean why I started this podcast, because of like as a musician, it's so you get to talk to interesting people who are great at what they do and have interesting thoughts, and we get to have that after performances and during rehearsals and just in our daily life. And it's like, why would I not share that? So thank you, man. Thank you so much for coming on. I got to have you back on.
All right. Yeah. You could do
All right.
You could do a part 2, or we could do something else. Right.
Exactly.
All right.
All right.
Do you have a sign off phrase
sign off?
that you use?
We can make one up. Keep on sounding on point. Yeah. Nope. Okay. Do you have a better one?
We can work on that. I would have to think about it.
Okay.
All right. I would say like this is Joe Christensen.
Yeah.
Keep your sound on point, yo.
Yeah, dude. Okay. This is Joe Christensen. Keep your sound on point.
Yo.
Yo. Oh, I forgot the yo. Okay, I'll work on it. All right. All right, man. Thank you. I'll see you later. Take care.